Big weekend of MMA on the way, and Kevin IOLE is actually on the boxing beat this weekend, but rest assured he'll be watching WEC 48, first-time pay-per-view for the smaller promotion for Zuffa. It's a big moment, and these guys deserve to be on pay-per-view, and it's going to be an action card.
You know what? I'm disappointed it's on pay-per-view because this is such a good card. I would like to see it to the masses, see so many people see this fight card. Because to me, this is one of the kind of fight cards, if you're on the fence about MMA, this will turn you into a fan. And pay-per-view is always, or generally the smallest audience. When you put it on free television, you get the biggest audience. I think it's a terrific fight card, and, I wish they could have maybe held off the pay-per-view a little longer so that the public could have gotten the chance to see this fight card, because it's not just a main event fight. It's not just a co-main event fight. There's good fights up and down this card. I wonder how they're going to put together another card, coming up in a couple of months, because they used all their good guys on this particular card. So I really think it's it's going to be a heck of a fight card, Steve.
How do you think it's going to do? Obviously, the Zuffa heads took things over. They're selling it like a UFC card, but they don't have the brand name. So can they eclipse 150,000 pay-per-view? Is 75,000 realistic? What's realistic?
I think around 100,000 is my number that I think is, going to be a good number. I mean, they've gotten a lot of good publicity out of it. They've, they've really promoted it hard. It was on, every other commercial on Spike the other night I saw when I was watching The Ultimate Fighter was for the pay-per-view. And I think they'll get 100,000 or so. I don't see them getting a lot more than that. I think if they do, it's a huge home run. And it'll tell you something that Uriah Faber is a big draw. I think, he would be the guy selling these pay-per-views, more so than anybody else. So if they do that, that's a testament to Uriah Faber's ability to sell. But I think it's a solid 100,000. I think if they go to 75,000, it's a disappointment. I think 100,000 is really the sweet spot right there.
What have you thought about the way they've sold it, the way they've handled the promotion?
Well, I'm a little surprised. I guess, basically what they're doing is they're bringing out their big guns. They've replaced Reed Harris with Dana White. Obviously, Dana is, the biggest name, even more so than a lot of the fighters. I equate it in a way to boxing, in the late 80s, early 90s. Don King was the biggest star in his promotion, and he was the guy that, was out there, pumping the fight and doing everything himself. And that's kind of, Dana's taking on that role in MMA. Dana is the face of the promotion. He's the face of the pay-per-view aspect. And so when you bring him in, and I mean, this is no offense to Reed Harris, but when you replace Reed with him, you get a lot of dynamic personality, and you get people on both sides. There's the people who love Dana and who are going to worship him and follow him, and then you have the people that dislike Dana and really are turned off by him. But he attracts a lot of attention, and I think that the people know a lot more about this card because Dana White's promoting it, and he's out there pumping it. He's on satellite radio, he's doing interviews, so I think that makes a big difference. And then they're going to bring in, Bruce Buffer, and they're going to, have Goldie and Joe Rogan doing it. So they're trying to brand it kind of like as a UFC event. We'll see how successful it is.
All right. Well, the fights are worth the purchase price, no doubt about it. We'll cover we'll cover 4 of the fights. Big fight, is one of the lead-ins to the main 3 fights, and that's Anthony Ngannou taking on Shane Roller. From a stylistic standpoint, it's going to put Ngannou to the test. Roller is definitely a candidate down the road if he keeps winning to get a title shot. But I think Ngannou is a guy that kind of excites people because he's that extra-level athlete and a great striker.
He is. I like Roller in the fight, Steve. I think it's his wrestling is going to be a difference in this. And Ngannou, the thing about him is not only is he a good striker, and he's good with his knees, his feet, his hands, his elbows, every appendage, he's very good at. Yeah. But he throws punches from odd angles. Remember his fight in December with Chris Horodecki with that kick. Horodecki's running away from him, and he gets kicked in the face from behind. Yep. You don't see that too much. But I think what's going to happen in this fight is Shane Roller is going to take him down, put him up against the fence, and beat him up. And, I really expect Shane Roller to have a good performance in this fight.
You have a former champion in Mike Brown featured against Manny Gamburyan. To me, the luster's kind of worn off Gamburyan. He's basically a ground and pound guy, and he's basically going against himself, but a lot better.
I think Mike Brown is going to pummel him. I mean, this is the one fight on the card. I think Mike Brown is an elite 145-pounder. I think Gamburyan is down the list, quite a bit. There's a lot of guys I'd rate before him. I never say a guy can never win the fight. At this level, when you're at the world-class level, all it takes is one mistake by somebody and the underdog can win the fight. But, I mean, if everything goes to form, Mike Brown is far better. I think Mike Brown is better on his feet. He's a better wrestler. He's better on the ground. So I don't see how Mike Brown loses this fight. I think he'll pound Gamburyan out on the ground, is what I believe.
Donald Cerrone, another fight against Ben Henderson. Really tight fight the last time. It was, pretty crazy. Henderson was caught in these wacky submissions and showed amazing flexibility. To me, the biggest thing is Donald Cerrone has to find a way to stay off his back, and he really hasn't been able to do that successfully throughout his career. And against good fighters, you're going to lose decisions unless you finish fights.
It's going to be an interesting fight. I mean, I'm really looking forward to seeing this one, Steve. I mean, I think the first one, the decision could have gone either way. There's a large school of thought that, hey, Cerrone had so many near submissions, especially earlier in the fight, that he deserved to win. Henderson, kind of controlled the middle part of the fight. And the fact that he was able to get out of those submissions, sometimes people don't, count that. But, you have to give a guy credit for getting out of those submissions and reversing a little bit anyways. This is a tough one to call. Logic tells me that Ben Henderson should win the fight, but I'm actually going to pick Donald Cerrone. I think Cerrone's been improving. I think he really wants this particular fight bad, and I think he's going to find a way. He was close last time. It's not going to take a lot different for him to get over the top, so I'm going to say Donald Cerrone is going to win this fight.
All right, the main event, they're selling off the star power of Faber, the future star power of Aldo. We'll start with Aldo. He has potential. He looks like just a vicious killer, like an Anderson Silva. Are we overrating him?
Yes, he does.
Are we overdoing it?
I think he's a terrific fighter. Now, what recent history has told us is that anytime you start comparing somebody to Anderson Silva or GSP or Fedor, you're overdoing it. In this sport, guys don't last very long. Anderson Silva is the rare guy. Fedor and Anderson Silva have stayed at the top a long time, and there are two of the few guys that have ever done that. What Anderson Silva has done, even I was disgusted with what he did at UFC 112. I want to say it again, absolutely disgusted. Didn't fight. I think all the criticism he received was deserved. But when you think about it, let's give the guy a little bit of credit too. He's won 10 consecutive fights in the UFC. He's got the most consecutive title defenses. I mean, he has beaten some really, really good guys. Jose Aldo's not at that point yet. Jose Aldo's won a couple of exciting fights. He's 16-1, but he hasn't faced the kind of competition that Anderson Silva has faced. I think Aldo is a terrific fighter, and I expect him to win the fight.
We've talked about it all the time over the years talking fighting. Styles do change things, and maybe Mike Brown was just an awful matchup for Aldo. Does Faber have the speed, the technical ability on the ground, the smart game planning to pull off the upset?
My head says one thing, my heart says another thing. I'd really like to see Uriah win the fight. I think he's such a good guy, and I think he's such a good guy for the sport. And MMA, needs guys like Uriah Faber who relentlessly promote the sport. And Uriah doesn't turn down an interview. He doesn't turn down an autograph request, a picture request. He's an omnipresent guy everywhere in the sport. He's all over the place. People like him, and he puts on exciting fights. So that's a guy that you would like to see rewarded. You'd like to see do well. Having said that, it's a tough fight for him. If he can get the fight to the ground, even though Aldo has some good ground skills and use his wrestling, I think that that will maybe be a difference in the fight. I give him a chance to win. I don't think it's a complete one-sided total blowout. But I think, it's going to be a huge challenge for him, a very difficult match for Uriah Faber here.
All right, good deal, Kev. Appreciate it, and we'll have you on next week because every weekend there's fights. we got MMA around the corner and boxing, and it gets nuttier by the weekend.
Yeah, no, I'm going. I think it's till July 3rd, Steve. It's crazy, but you know what? That's why I have the greatest job in the world. I just travel the world covering fights. Nothing better than that.